Hi students, and welcome to this introduction to The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. So what is this book about? It's about the growing pains of a nation moving from an agrarian economy to an industrial capitalist economy, something our nation was still going through in the early 20th century. It's about the inevitable collision between old and new inhabitants of a place and the resentment and mistrust such a collision breeds. It's also about the plight of the labor class, who have nothing to sell but their labor and thus no upward mobility. I mentioned in a previous lesson that this is very much a Marxist novel, and so those classic Marxist ideas are in there about the plight of laborers who cannot move upward in society because they have nothing to move upward with. It's also about the inherent conflict of interest between employers and laborers and the extreme measures each side resorts to in times of crisis. Finally, in the end, Grapes of Wrath is really about what happens when there simply isn't enough to go around, or there seems not to be enough to go around. Some key facts about the novel. The Grapes of Wrath, it's a full title, written by John Steinbeck, published in 1939. It is set in Oklahoma first and then in California over the course of a few months during the 1930s, some year during the 1930s. It's not really precise. The point of view, it's told from the third person, and the narrator is omniscient. The genre, it is fiction, it is a novel, it is a modernist work, and it is considered an epic novel because of the scope of the book and the length, and also the journey that the characters take is considered epic. So what's with the title, Grapes of Wrath? What the heck does that even mean? The title is actually taken from the first verse of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was a patriotic song popularized during the Civil War and became a sort of anthem of the Union Army. And the verse goes a little something like this: "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on." It's a real happy, pleasant song, isn't it? But this is where the actual title came from, that Steinbeck pulled it from, is that phrase, Grapes of Wrath. So what's with that? Still didn't really explain anything, so what's with the title here? Well, the line Grapes of Wrath is actually a reference to a verse in the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible depicting the end of days, where God returns to earth and the wicked are damned and the blessed are saved, that sort of thing. And here's the part of the Revelations where it comes from. "And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs." And so it's meant just to kind of represent the wrath of God here. These grapes have been ripening in the earth, sort of to represent sort of the wickedness and worldliness of those on earth who were not worshipers of God, basically. That kind of the wickedness of earth kind of ripening in the form of this grape to be harvested by God in the end of days. It's a really oblique sort of metaphor here. So in the end, I guess you could say the title is an allusion to an illusion. It suggests that there's some end of an era that is coming. The ripened grapes in the book are kind of like the labor class, these poor migrant workers whose resentment of their condition in life is starting to kind of boil over, starting to fully ripen and ready to be harvested. It evokes images of God sort of lifting these righteous laborers and then condemning the wicked ownership class. So again, it's kind of a really oblique metaphor, just representing the threat of revolt in a time of change. A little bit about John Steinbeck. There he is. That's That's John Steinbeck. Who he was born in 1902 in Salinas, California. He died in 1968 in New York City. Before he was a famous author, he did go to Stanford to study writing, so obviously a very intelligent student to get into Stanford, but he didn't really see the value in school and actually dropped out before he got his degree because he wanted to move to New York and write for a living. That didn't really work out. He ended up moving back to California because he ran out of money and lived until he became a published author, lived very meagerly, and wrote about the downtrodden members of society. Some of his other notable works include Tortilla Flat, which was his first big critical success in 1935. Of Mice and Men followed that in 1937. Then Grapes of Wrath in 1939. East of Eden, he took a little break there, came back with East of Eden in 1952, and then his last best-known work was Travels with Charlie in 1962. Travels with Charlie wasn't even really a novel. These other are novels. Travels with Charlie was actually a travel log. Steinbeck's writings about his travels across America with his pet poodle named Charlie. Some of the motivations behind the Grapes of Wrath. Well, it's set in the 1930s, so in the midst of the Great Depression. This is a time when there was a severe drought which struck the Great Plains area. The areas had been overcultivated really for decades and over a century before this. The Great Plains not really initially good for farming, but over the course of people settling there over the last century, they had kind of cultivated this area which really wasn't good for farming into usable farmland. And in the years following World War I, they were overcultivated with crops like wheat and cotton, which would just suck up all the nutrients in the soil if not regulated properly. So there was a severe drought was struck this area. The drought killed the crops, and then the loose topsoil that was left, combined with the dry conditions, allowed the wind to just sort of kick dirt up into the atmosphere, which created huge dust storms and a sort of perpetual haze over the Great Plains areas. And these dust storms traveled as far east as New York City and as far north as Chicago. So it was really this really incredible environmental disaster. In fact, the Dust Bowl is what we call it, is the largest man-made ecological disaster in American history. Compounding the ecological crisis was the economic crisis at the time. It was the Great Depression. Farmers didn't have a lot of money to fall back on, and so when their crops died, they were forced to mortgage their farms. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a mortgage is, that's where you take a loan out from the bank to pay for something. In this case, the farmer's paying just to survive, to buy food for their families. And in exchange for that loan, they agree to pay the money back. But to secure that the bank gets their money back, the farmers have to put up something of equal value, and so of course they'd put up their farms. But unfortunately, conditions didn't improve. The drought persisted, crops died again the following season, and the banks when the farmers couldn't pay back their loans, the banks foreclosed on the farms, and thousands and thousands of families were forced to leave their family farms in the Great Plains area. Many of these families traveled west looking for work with little more than just hope on their mind, no real idea of what waited for them there. Steinbeck decided to write about the plight of these migrant farm workers, so he went to live with an Oklahoma family and actually took the journey with them to California. And this experience produced The Grapes of Wrath, which is a raw, unflinching depiction of one of the most turbulent times in our history. So the critical success of Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck was already critical and public success by the time he wrote Grapes of Wrath, but Grapes of Wrath was an immediate bestseller, although Oklahomans and Californians sort of disliked the unflattering portrayals of their people. A large majority of readers still praised the novel. It did win the Pulitzer in 1940, and later that same year was adapted into an Oscar-winning film starring Henry Fonda. Ultimately, in 1962, by the way, John Steinbeck did win the Nobel Prize for Literature, and The Grapes of Wrath is widely considered to be his greatest masterpiece. All right, for more information on John Steinbeck's life, I've posted a link to a short video. It's another video by the Biography channel if you want to watch that, learn a little bit more about him. Also, if you'd like some more information on the time period, check out the second optional video that I've posted. It's one of the John Green crash course videos. It's over the Great Depression. Also, if you want to see what you're reading in the book, some really good visualizations of the Dust Bowl, I've linked a segment from a documentary by Ken Burns on the Great Depression. Specifically, this segment deals with the Dust Bowl, so you can really see what this era looked like, what this natural disaster looked like, and what these people were living through. All right, that's it. Enjoy reading, and I'll see you in class.